Hi and welcome to this junk journal with me. Thank you for joining me. Today I'm starting off with a coffee dyed paper, which is a little bit thicker than my regular paper. It's a 160 GSM, just smooth copy paper. And after dyeing it, I put it into my printer and I took some images out of this old natural history school book, which is from I think 1961, and I took some of the images from this page. So I scanned the page and took some of the images and then cut them out and resized them to work with what I was doing. So what I'm doing here is I'm actually working on a homework assignment for my calligraphy course, because so many of you have written me that you want to see my progress. So this is just a chart that we got to see how tall our lines need to be depending on what nib we are using. And this is a very classical calligraphy course, and this is the text I'm going to be copying from the book. So the assignment was to write a text and to use this specific font that we are currently using, which is a modern cursive script, and we were to include some images but no photos. So that is why I decided to do this layout and this design. I thought a vintage layout would work very well with this, and so I thought I would just do this on camera and show you what I'm doing. So this is my black ink, and actually this is already my second one. They're actually pretty big and I've already used one up completely. So I've been doing this course for like 5 to 6 weeks, and it's intense. I'm loving it, but it's intense, and the teacher is great. And these are the nibs. This is a set of nibs that we got from the school. I have 2 sets of these because I bought them before I knew that we would actually get a set. But it's good to have more, I realized, because sometimes one doesn't work right, and it's nice to have a backup. So this is like the holder for the nib. It probably has a very professional name that I'm not aware of. And this, for example, is a flat nib. This is a I believe a 2mm nib that I'm starting out with for the heading. And I'm doing this in German because I could have also done it in English, but since I was copying from a German book, I decided to just use the German. And so now I'm just testing if the nib actually, whether the ink is flowing. That's always good to test first when you're trying to do something nice. And the interesting thing was, and I'm guessing a lot of you don't know this either, just like I didn't know, that you do not dip your nib into the ink directly. You should never do that. Instead, you should use a brush like I have there, just a cheap paintbrush, dip that in your ink and then put it onto your nib. And at first I thought this was very strange, especially because you're always holding 2 instruments in your hands. And you can't really hold the paper, but you're supposed to kind of somehow make the paper, like you're supposed to attach it somehow to something. I could actually attach it with washi tape. That would make sense, but I haven't done that so far. Yeah, so but I've really grown accustomed to doing this, and now I'm actually loving using the paintbrush to put the ink on. And as you can see already, the first letter under the heading I already messed up because the D is way too small. I kind of messed up with my lines. And so I decided, rather than starting over, I am going to find a way to cover that up once I'm done writing, because I didn't know maybe I was going to make another mistake. So I just went with it for now and decided to forget about it until I'm done with the writing and then just figure something out later on. This Z is a total catastrophe. I don't know what happened there. It's such a hard letter to write. The small one is okay, as you can see here, but the big one I have not become friends with yet. Okay, now on the bottom I have already written it in pencil, just like I did the heading, because I wanted to make sure the spacing was going to work, and it was a very tight fit. And I'm not used to writing this small because we usually write a lot bigger in our assignments. As you will see at the end, I'm showing you some of my assignments just in case you guys are interested in seeing my progress. And yeah, so now that part is done as well. And gosh, I wish it would take that little time to actually do that in real life. It's not quite that quick. So what I did now is I played around with the images again from the book page and printed out this little image of the flower, which I then decided to use to cover up that mistake. So I just tore it out and I'm going to ink the edges, and then I'm just going to glue that there, and nobody will ever know that there's a little tiny D under there. But first I had to erase all my pencil lines, and now I am going to glue that there. And finally I'm going to ink the edges of this paper. And that is it for this side of the paper, and I'm hoping that my teacher is going to like it. I have scanned it in at this stage, and I will send it electronically to her, and in the meantime I'm going to work on the back side because we're going to put this into my journal. And on the back side I am using a decoupage technique that I have seen a lot on other YouTube channels, and I've also done in previous videos. So I'm just going to take off all the layers of this tissue, and this one actually had 4 layers, which was interesting. And now I'm using my wet paint brush to trace around the part that I wanted to use. So that was going to go on the bottom right corner, and then I also wanted something else for the top left corner, so I'm going to do the same thing, just go around it with my brush. There's actually no reason why I'm using this water brush because I'm actually dipping it into water. But it's a very good brush, it's a very fine tip, and it's a fairly firm tip, which is why I like using it. But it works better actually when you dip it in water. But I could take it along with me if I didn't have any water at hand. It makes it just so easy to tear. I couldn't even see where my line was anymore, but I was just pulling, and it was tearing in exactly the right places. So this method is just so stress-free. I love it so much. And just to keep things simple, I decided I'm just going to use my glue stick again to glue this on rather than a Mod Podge, because sometimes when I use Mod Podge the napkin tends to tear and it takes longer to dry, and it's just a mess. Always when you're using some kind of fluids, or when I use fluids, I tend to have a mess at the end. So I really prefer using this quick method with the glue stick. And you just have to be sure everything is really glued down all the way to your edges. Now I'm doing the same thing with the other side. Now you might be thinking, okay, I don't do calligraphy, so why is this useful for me? Well, I would like to point out a video I have just seen this morning from, I still don't know how to pronounce her name correctly, Geiker, I don't know, but she's lovely and she makes awesome videos. And here I'm just going over the edges with a file just to smooth everything out a little bit. And yeah, so I saw this video from her where she makes these little packets of letters and envelopes that she's going to, I'm not sure, sell, I guess, or gift. I'm not sure. And this is the method she uses for the background of the letters. So I'm linking that video below. Check her out. It's such a cute video, and she does such amazing things. Like, I learned so much from her. So now I'm just using my scripty background stamp, which is again linked below. It's the same one I used in my previous video. It's from AliExpress, and I'm just using my vintage photo because I didn't want to use black. I didn't want it to be so dominant. So I'm just stamping all over. And what I actually wanted to say was, first, so I'm going to use a little bit of gesso, just a tiny bit, with a dry brush to just go over some of the parts of the napkin, just to tone everything down a little bit, just to mute it. And what I actually forgot to do on camera, what I did after I finished with this video was I went over the white parts because they were a little bit too white. I went over it with some, I think it's vintage linen distress ink, just to age it a little bit more by going over the white lightly. So what I wanted to say was, so you can just, on the other side where I did the calligraphy, you can just either leave it blank, obviously, if you're going to put it in a journal that you want to sell, or you can just, if you're going to use it in your own journal, you can just write either a letter to yourself or just journal on it like you would on a normal journal page, and then maybe you could put it in a beautiful envelope, or you could just put it in the way I will be putting it in my journal that you will see in a bit. Or you could do another collage on the other side. You can do whatever you want, obviously, but I'm kind of using it as a letter. And so, yeah, just write a letter to yourself. Write a letter to your younger self. Why not? I've done that a few times, and it always surprises me what I come up with. It might surprise you too what you would write, even though you think, well, you know, there's nothing special. But if you think about it and then write it down, you might be surprised. Okay, so both sides were finished. So now I was going to put it into my journal. This is the one that I've made with flexible binding. And I chose this blank page. And I decided to just fold it in 3. So I'm just going to take my ruler to crease those edges. And then fold down the other side. And then I wanted to make some sort of a closure so that it would not open on its own. So I decided to use this image, which is also a scanned image from that page that I had left over. I'm going to glue this on some thicker cardstock since I wanted it to be a little bit more sturdy. And then I'm going to use my round 1.5 inch circle punch to punch that image out that I could then use as a closure. And I thought I had ruined my punch because it didn't open again after I took it out, but thankfully I was able to push that bottom part out. I don't know if that has ever happened to you guys. It's the second time this has happened to me, and luckily I was able to save both of the stamps that happened with, but I'm always panicking like, oh my god, it's ruined. But usually you can just push it up from the bottom with a little bit of strength. So don't throw them out if that happens to you, if they get stuck. So now I'm just putting some glue on the bottom part, obviously not the top part, so otherwise I couldn't open it. So now you have this beautiful letter, and you can just glue it into your book, which is what I'm going to do. So I'm just going to take my glue stick and then glue that on. And then you're going to see some of my homework. You're going to see where I started off. End of July was when I started this course, and it's a very good teacher. She's pretty strict with her grading, but I think she's very fair. So we started off with this, and we're working we started with this round nib, which was really interesting. I've never worked with a nib like this before, and it was quite challenging to get the feel of it. So this is a basic block letter font that we started with, and as you see we're doing big letters, and that was really challenging at the beginning to even make that nib work for you, to have straight lines. It looks so easy, but it's really not. It takes quite a lot of practice. And then this was the first big homework assignment to kind of make like a poster with the font that we learned just randomly, basically. So that was what I came up with. I was very happy with this. I actually got a pretty good grade on that. Then we started with the, I don't know if this translates into English as well, it's the Antiqua or Antiqua. I'm guessing it's called Antiqua font, which is now with a flat nib. So this is a 4mm flat nib, and these are you will see various variations of this font. Again, all with the 4mm. It's big, which I guess is the best way to learn. And the hardest thing about this lettering is not writing the actual letters, but the spacing of the letters, because depending on what letter comes before and after, you need to adjust your spacing depending on hard to describe, so that it looks even, so that when you look at one page, the spacing looks even. So when you have for example, a W and a V next to each other, like right there you see on the top, it's gonna look different than when you have an M and an N next to each other. So that is the biggest challenge in all of this writing, especially when it's as big as this and you really see it. You see every millimeter that's wrong, basically. So now this is still the Antica font, and here the assignment was to come up with some monograms, and this was pretty cool. This was fun to design some monograms. I did kind of forget to do my own monogram, which would have been BH. I don't know how that happened. So continuing on with different variations of this font. So this is about 5 weeks worth of different font. And what is also challenging for me is when you do this many assignments, one after the other, you're learning a different font at least every week, sometimes 2 or 3 within a week, depending on how many assignments you do. So after a while, it's easy to get confused when you're writing something, to see like, okay, which, how did this capital letter look now? Was it this font or was it the previous font? And it gets kind of confusing because you're not spending a lot of time on each font. So this is a really nice one. This one is now a cursive font, which is leaned to the right 10 degrees. So when you use that, you actually have to make some lines, some guidelines. And this was an assignment that we had. It was to make a book cover. So this was what I did, and I was very happy with the outcome. It took me quite a few times to get it to be like this. But I did get full points on that and an extra star. I was so happy. It was the first time I got full points on an assignment. So that made me happy. And this is the current font. These are the capitals of what you just saw me writing on that page. So that's as far as I've got. Let me know if you enjoyed seeing this calligraphy, if I should do some more on camera with you guys later on. Otherwise, I'll just do it on my own. That's fine too. I hope you enjoyed this, and see you in the next video. Thank you for watching. Bye!